Hey, Last Mile DeFi friends. This conversation is with Jackie Bona, the CEO of Valora Wallet. So, in this conversation, we explore Jackie's background coming from Google, Spotify, Twitter, where she was primarily working on the product marketing front. We discuss what lessons she took from this past experience and how she's now leveraging that to build Valora Wallet. So for those of you that aren't familiar, Valora Wallet is a wallet destined to onboard the masses by providing a seamless user experience that is hyper-localized. To date, Valora is present in over 100 different countries and has been translated into 13 different languages, something that is truly unique to the wallet ecosystem. So we discussed the origins of the Valora Wallet, which began as a testing wallet of the Celo ecosystem that was originally field tested in refugee camps and throughout Latin America. We explore some of the challenges when it comes to building wallets that enable mass onboarding, and also where the opportunities lie for crypto wallets in the future. Something that I think is really important to emphasize is the need to develop crypto solutions that unlock practical utility today, whether that is payments, providing UBI, or just generally being able to exchange goods and services through cryptographic means, and also creating wallets that provide a seamless experience for people to do that. So for those of you that, like me, believe that crypto wallets are the future of mass adoption, this conversation will be super fascinating. Hope you enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Last Mile DeFi. Today I am joined by Jackie Bona from Valora. Jackie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Super happy to have you here. We first met at DevCon in Bogota and had a really fascinating conversation amidst all the buzz and a very sort of like relevant context. So really great to sort of dive into a little bit further of what you're working on with Valora and just get your thesis on the future of wallets, kind of the current state as well. So, but before diving into all of that amazing content, would love to explore a little bit more of your personal story, just get a sense of, how did you get to where you are today? What sort of led you to crypto, and what ultimately led you to work on Valora? So let's start there.
Ooh, sorry, I'm still getting used to this this equipment. But yeah, a little bit about my background and personal story. I guess I could start with my personal background. I grew up here in California, but was born in the Philippines, and so my family and I immigrated to the U.S. when I was 5. So very used to kind of the dual culture. Stayed close to my family in the Philippines. If anything, I was just there for Christmas. And so even to this day, something that's like a big part of me. And really, I think where that carries over to my professional background and what's been kind of the driving motivation kind of in my work and in my life is I got to see essentially the difference between growing up here in the US and growing up in the Philippines, and essentially the haves and have-nots. And the fact that like opportunity is not equal, even though talent and drive and intelligence can be. And so, throughout my life, I've really used education as something to help open up opportunities. I was lucky enough to go, to a great university. Then, got a chance to join the tech industry in a very early stage. And so that's where I've spent the majority of my career. And if anything, this is where I learned boundless, possibilities and opportunities, having worked on many global, high growth businesses and tech companies. And so, kind of talking a little bit about my professional career, I've spent the last, 15 plus years working in, some of the biggest tech companies. Got my start at Google, where I spent a total of 8 years there, primarily working on kind of monetization and go-to-market in international markets. I started off in a very humble role, essentially, kind of a customer service sales role. Did everything from, door-to-door ad sales to, approving ads to, writing customer service emails and even doing a 866 line. And so I saw that as, a very formative time in my career, my first 2 years of my tech career, because there you're interfacing directly with users. You have to know the product inside and out because you're kind of like answering all these questions. And then you're actually educating them as, back then as online advertising was very new. I see a lot of parallels to that with crypto, right? Because obviously we're working in a very new space where not a lot of people know or know how to use this new technology. And so I was able to take a lot of that experience. And in that time at Google, had worked in many different markets around the world. So it was sent to different offices, not only to launch them, but to also launch new products. So I spent time in Asia, where I spent time in Singapore as well as in India. Also spent a good amount in Latin America, where I spent 2.5 years, mostly in the Brazil market, working on YouTube and Google monetization there. A little bit of time in Argentina and in Mexico, and then eventually came back to the US, where I really wanted to, leverage that international perspective and kind of, build and lead global teams that have not only empathy, but can work to, to obviously influence teams, not only here in kind of the headquarters for these big tech companies, but also to build products for people around the world. And so that's kind of the story of my career, at least at Google. Moved to Twitter, was in a similar role, spent 3 years there, obviously was there at a high growth time. We were also launching offices internationally, led product marketing there and did a very similar role. Also at Spotify, launching different products to global audiences around the world. You're probably wondering, why did I leave that? Because that sounds pretty awesome. And it was. However, I think that kind of taking the challenge of, how do you kind of take a very hard problem of, launching a brand new product that will have massive impact that is global. I was kind of thinking about what I wanted to do next, that I didn't really know where I wanted to work, but I had an idea of different industries of or problems that I wanted to work on, and therefore different industries. And so crypto was actually one of the industries that I was thinking of. However, it wasn't really on the top of my list, primarily because I didn't really see a lot of people that looked like me. And, obviously didn't have a great, crypto just doesn't have a great reputation in general for diversity. But I knew it was, obviously a very early but impactful technology, one that has global scope from day one, and one that could have massive impact to users. And kind of as I was, pondering and contemplating this, I got introduced to the founders of Cello, found out a little bit more about their mission, really, to expand prosperity for all. And I love their focus on emerging markets, which is, obviously something that I have a passion for and have a background in. And so took the leap to join the Cello team in early 2020. Worked with them to launch Mainnet. Valora, or the earliest version of Valora, was actually the test app that was used to build certain layers of the protocol to make it mobile first and user friendly. And essentially that, with my product marketing background, wanted to kind of name it, launch it, and the rest is history in terms of actually turning it into its own company. And so that's a little bit about my background and how I got into crypto.
Incredible. I love that you can bring all of the experience across your time at Google, Twitter, Spotify, all of which are very user-facing companies, and be able to leverage that and bring all that insight to a really hard problem, which is crypto wallets, right? I think they're generally seen as really the so far, in my opinion, of all the wallets I have seen in the ecosystem, no one wallet is, and it's not necessarily that we will have one wallet that will do everything, but it really does feel that that is one of the key barriers to entry. And from a lot of the conversations I've had to date as well, that is resounding feedback I've seen in the industry. So I'd love to get your overview on Valora, get a sense of, where does the Valora story emerge from, started at Cello, what were the theses you were exploring as you were looking to build out Valora, and where did you want to take it as you continue to, grow it past Cello as well? And I know you at one point sort of decided to branch out from the Cello ecosystem specifically and create its own sort of like Valora application. So I'm wondering if you could just kind of walk us through the Valora story and your intentions as you were going about building the wallet.
Yeah. So, I mentioned that really Valora, or the early version of Valora, started at Cello, and Cello being a mobile optimized, and also very user focused blockchain. In order for the early team to be able to do that, they needed something that users can test and feel, and you can't really play with a protocol, right? And so the earliest version of Valora was that test app that the team would use in field research. So they would go out to different markets like the Philippines, Argentina, even refugee camps in Africa, to essentially test out, like, could we build something that would be useful and that could work on any grade mobile phone in adverse environments that had like low connectivity. And I think for me, that was something that, in terms of the principle of having a tool and an app and a wallet that had access that anyone with a mobile phone, no matter if they had the latest iPhone or a years old Android phone, could actually access, still remains true to this day. But going back to the origin, again, it was used as the test app. The early Celo team was able to find out a few things just from user research, because they essentially tried to build a global Venmo on top of Ethereum, and couldn't, primarily because of high gas fees, primarily, but also just didn't really function on a mobile phone and low connectivity. And so the early version of Valora was born. They tested it out in multiple markets. They found out things that, not only do you need low fees, but you need an easy way for people to actually pay for transaction fees. And so one of the things that, Valora takes advantage of from the Celo platform is the ability to pay for gas with a single token. So you don't need, two different tokens, because that doesn't make sense for a non-crypto native user. And to be able to do it, in a fast and secure way. And so those were really the key things that were discovered, from the early days of Valora. As we work to launch not only the Celo mainnet platform, but also some of the stablecoin currencies like CUSD, this really enabled the ability to actually send global currency, in a seamless manner. And so, one of the things with Valora, that we take advantage of is the ability to be able to text money to any phone number in the world. And so, not using your public key identifier, which is very long, easy to mess up, impossible to remember, but your phone number, right? Like, most people have a phone number and a mobile phone. And I think that was like one of the driving forces for us at Celo, was that, more people have mobile phones versus bank accounts. And so from an access and addressable opportunity point of view, this was really the opportunity that we wanted to fill, was to be able to provide financial services to people with their mobile phones. And the broadest way to be able to provide that access was, via mobile. So, essentially, again, going back to kind of the original kind of goal of Valora, was really to help share value and to create value for people, for anyone with a mobile phone. And so, the early version of Valora was born. Again, went from test app to then really thinking about, well, this can be something that has legs, that can stand on its own, obviously with the support of the community and Celo itself. So this is really where I saw the opportunity to brand Valora into kind of its own identity, its own name, and to really, figure out, like, what would it take to actually launch this in a big way. And so the name Valora was born, and really the name comes from a derivative of the Esperanto word of value, which is valoro. And I really, the vision of it was that I was like, wow, like, this is really a tool that can unlock new possibilities of value and opportunity. Not only, are you able to kind of send funds seamlessly with this app, but like through this kind of rich ecosystem of dApps, you're able to do so many things, like, gain access to financial services through DeFi. But then also, a lot of the early usage for Valora was actually used in tandem with many of these solutions that were built on Celo that helped underserved communities make their assets more productive. And so, there's a few stories that I can tell, some of these like early pilots and some of the use cases where Valora is used today. that kind of unlock these opportunities and new possibilities of value. And so so that's really where the name comes from. And again, we've been focused on kind of access, usability through seamless UX, and also like how do you make this kind of like these new solutions, right? Relevant and familiar to the communities that you're actually speaking to. And so we've done a lot of work, not only to kind of language localize the app. Valora is localized in 13 different languages, but also working with the seller community to how do we package up, some of these local solutions and dApps, so Valora can work for these local communities. I know we're still very early in that, but that's really the vision, is using this as a tool to, essentially provide financial services to people in multiple markets around the world. And how do you make it culturally relevant to them?
Amazing. I love that. For me, it's always very assuring knowing that the Valora team is doing the work as far as being able to localize the development of a wallet that had its origins very early on in the Celo ecosystem, that, as you said, was like battle tested in refugee camps throughout Latin America as well. And so to know that there is, a specific wallet that is being developed with that in mind is I think a big assurance for those that care about last mile adoption, right? I mean, very few wallets that I have come across are translated into local languages, which I think is oftentimes like a starting point that people need to think about from the moment you open the app. If it's in English, for example, which tends to be the case, you are immediately going to have a really high drop off rate, because how are you meant to even store, private keys, for example, right? And so I'd love to understand and get a picture of, and this is both like from a macro perspective, how's it going at Valora? How's adoption going? Where have you seen like really exciting use cases come up? And maybe also dive into like as you're weaving that story, a couple of examples of, people that are using it on a regular basis and have derived a substantial amount of value from the application.
So in terms of how it's been going, so Valora just turned 2 actually a couple weeks ago, which has been really exciting. We did our public launch in 2021. And we actually did this really fun campaign called Your Valora, where we looked at kind of like different user activity of our users, segmented them, and like kind of created them into like fun personas. And so kind of like a Spotify Wrapped, but for like on-chain activity. And essentially, like was able to kind of do this fun, kind of thank you to our users. We gifted them an NFT. We kind of like told them to check their wallet to see what persona they were. So I don't know, Marcus, if you've checked, but you can either be like a DeFi diver, a social butterfly, a Celo power user, NFT patron, etc. So there's multiple personas there. The community really came out, and we also had this like really fun competition where it's like if you shared your Valora persona, you can like win a prize essentially. And what that translated into was actually our users in 13 different languages tweeting about their Valora persona. So you could actually search on Twitter #YourValora to kind of see all the different languages, everything from Spanish to Thai to Russian. And so it was a really cool kind of display of our community. Kind of where that kind of leads in terms of adoption is so Valora is used in over 100 different countries, which is great. We've seen very healthy traction from some of the European markets, Spain and Italy specifically. A lot of that was guided from some of the early campaigns that we did. Since we have good on ramps there, strong traction in some African markets like Nigeria and Kenya. Historically strong crypto adoption in general, but like some of the early Celo pilots that we've done there from a micro work perspective also have carried over from today. And then in Latin America, Brazil is actually one of our strongest markets, which is driven by a lot of the users from some of the partners that we work with in the Celo ecosystem that focus on UBI, which is actually really a great thing because, again, the original vision for Valora was to kind of use Valora as a tool to kind of empower people to access financial services through their mobile phone. So yeah, so like Brazil, Colombia as well also has, great traction there. I mentioned that I wanted to kind of tell a story, and I wanted to focus on one from Latin America, since I know this is what this podcast is focused on. But essentially, back during the pandemic, so this is like in the early days of when we had launched Valora publicly, or in beta, I mean. We ran a pilot with the Cello Foundation, and actually with James, who you know and has been on this podcast, to see, like, could we provide microloans to Venezuelan refugees? As you know, there's many of them in Colombia that come and basically have to rebuild their lives. They don't have formal documentation, and oftentimes are not eligible, for work. And so, how are we able to kind of empower them, right, with kind of additional capital to make their time and their work more productive? And so, again, this Colombia pilot started during the pandemic, where the Cello team kind of, used Cello platform, but also Valora to empower a group of Venezuelan migrants who worked as delivery people for Rappi. So I think they're called Rapideros. Is that you're probably more familiar than I on this.
I don't know if that's what they're called. We have early instances of Rappi here. It's just coming to Guatemala, but yeah, the listeners will actually have heard at this point part of James's story as well. So it's nice to be able to bring these two worlds together.
Great. Yes, and so basically, the team was able to basically take these. Work with these couriers to essentially give them just a $500 microloan to be able to purchase, a motor to basically make their deliveries much more efficient. They would typically do these deliveries on a manual bicycle, but actually through this microloan, actually be able to get, essentially make this a motorized bike to, help them be more productive and extended their range and double their income. And so, definitely some of the benefits here was that, through Cello and Valora, and through these kind of digital microloans, these, essentially, this group of refugees was able to access financial services through their mobile phone, get great terms, increase transparency, and then also just offer them the opportunity, right, to participate in, work that could be more productive for them. And so, I mean, long story short, the result of the story was the average, I guess, earning potential for the cohort of the people that participated, their incomes doubled just from this, and wouldn't have been able to do that, right, without this additional capital to kind of get this motorbike to double their income. And so, really making a substantial impact to their lives, and something that wouldn't have been possible without the ability to be able to kind of do this through decentralized finance. And so, something that I really love, and a story that I really love to tell, primarily because, this is like a perfect kind of, I guess, embodiment of what we want the vision to be for both Cello and Valora, right? Is like, how do we use this tool that everyone has in their back pocket, a mobile phone, to, increase their access to opportunities that they wouldn't normally have access to, and therefore get them on the path of prosperity. And so, so I think this is, just one example, but something that I would love to be able to, continue in terms of the work that we've been doing. And so that's great to hear that, James has also referenced this as well. Since it is something that, again, it's a good embodiment of the vision and what we want to see more of in the world.
I think the Rola story is such a powerful one, and to be able to, particularly with Venezuelan migrants, to be able to offer them some form of identification that isn't otherwise recognized by national governments or people who might provide you with microfinancing, and to be able to contain all of that as well within the Valora ecosystem, where there may be a future where your government issued ID is perhaps you can verify that on chain, and that is held in your wallet, as well as your past credit history as well. And all of that can ultimately be delivered to users through a super seamless and slick app. And so I do want to sort of get into your thoughts around the wallet ecosystem that exists today. But before doing that, could you speak a little bit more to, as you were, and this is going back to the instance when you jumped into crypto, what was it that you saw in the Celo ecosystem, where I think these types of stories with Roda and Valora and a lot of others, the UPI that's being distributed through Celo, like I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit more to what is it that you saw in the Celo ecosystem? What are you seeing today, and where do you really see kind of the Celo ecosystem continuing to grow and flourish? And, what role will Valora play as those expansions and growth continues to happen within Celo?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think for me, again, the original kind of introduction to Celo for me was really around the mission and its commitment to end users, and that was something that I saw that was unique relative to the blockchains, at least 3 years ago that existed, and probably even more arguably so to this day. Very focused on the end user, very focused on emerging markets. And, I think many of us that work in crypto really see the true application for crypto to really empower, right, kind of people that aren't able to access the traditional financial system. And that was like one of the driving forces there. I think also not only was the mission was something that stood out for me with Celo, but it was the fact that they were focused on mobile. And really, I mean, one of the only blockchains or maybe the only blockchain even to this day that is focused on mobile in that way. Having worked at many of these tech companies in my career, and really having worked in the time where mobile took off, back in kind of 2008-ish, 2009, after the iPhone really took off, App Store, etc. I mean, there's still a massive opportunity there. And I think that, again, going back to like more people have a mobile phone in their back pocket than an access to a bank account or a government issued ID, et cetera. All these people can access the internet, right? Like they could all access like Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, all of these different things, right? They all know how to search now. And it's like, well, why can't they like, send money like they would a text message or a phone number, or be able to access, a loan as easily as like, I don't know, signing up for a Twitter account. And I think like for me, that was really something that stood out when really learning about Celo was, everyone always talks about the mission, but I also think it's just the opportunity, right, itself to be able to reach and impact as many people as possible through something that already has like ubiquitous adoption, and really an untapped opportunity for just the crypto market, or crypto industry in general, is really something that still excites me today. And so where does Valora fit in, and where does Valora fit in all of this? It's like, well, I mean, we're a mobile only wallet. We don't have a web plugin or anything like that. We've optimized everything for you to be able to do everything on your mobile phone. Not only the ability to transact and do whatever you need to do within a wallet, but we've been also working really hard to be able to on and off ramp your crypto in the wallet itself, on your mobile phone. And so I think that really we want to be able to have a great end-to-end experience, just on your mobile phone, just so you can kind of do everything you need to do, live your digital life. And, if you don't have a laptop or access beyond your mobile phone, Valora could be the home for you. And so that's really where kind of Celo and Valora comes in, is really anchored on not only the mission, but mobile first.
All right. So I'd also love to explore your thoughts around the wider wallet ecosystem. So we've heard a lot about Valora and a lot of the very poignant value add that you're bringing to last mile users around the world, and also in Latin America. As you mentioned, this podcast is really centered around the role of onboarding more folks in the region into crypto. So why haven't we been able to deploy wallets where everyone, instead of having to rely on really clunky mobile banking apps that oftentimes require like a outrageously high fee for people to be able to access, as the case here in Guatemala, or still using cash in a similar fashion to, say, Venmo, a payments application in the States. I'm it boggles me that we still don't have a wallet here that basically the Libra project that Facebook was working on. Like, why haven't we yet gotten to that state where wallets are serving like a mass user base? What are the sort of friction points? And maybe just walk us through the mental models that you've seen in wallet companies, projects that are looking to deploy their wallets, and why do we still not have mass adoption within the wallet ecosystem?
Good question, and it's a hard problem to solve, and obviously one that we've been thinking about every day here at Valora. I think it comes down, to how do you actually make this tool something that's useful in your day-to-day life, and a lot of that is like, can you use this digital currency for everyday kind of use cases and goods and services? A lot of that today is, either blocked by on and off ramps. So that's like a big problem that we see. And really, kind of taking a step back of really taking a look at like, what is a wallet actually used for, right? It should be used as a tool to kind of help you, make your life better, to kind of help you, not only store value, but to kind of exchange for goods and services in the real world. But then also, how do you make these assets more productive for you, right? And so one big part of that is, if you're not able to kind of exchange this digital currency for something in your local currency, right? And I think in many of these emerging markets, you have models like, local agents and kind of these local communities where they have been able to kind of solve this on and off ramp problem, albeit in a small way. And so you're kind of like asking about like this like wider adoption. So we have seen it work, right, in these communities where they have kind of solved this problem. And whether is the on ramp is like, UBI distribution, earning, the digital asset into existence through micro work in your mobile phone. These are all things that Valora has been used for in the past, which is like, they're excellent on ramps. But, I think the big question is like, how do we scale that? Because it's like, once you kind of, have these kind of great on ramps, some of the other, barriers that you would think would be an issue, like trust, for example, or like, I don't know how to use this, like those could actually be pretty easily solved if you're able to kind of get money into the hands of these people and show them that this could be, well, one, useful for them, then the second, more productive than maybe cash, right? And so I do think that that's like a massive opportunity, is to kind of figure out like, what are on and off ramps that kind of make sense. And, it's not just about like linking your debit card or whatever into a wallet, which, is fine too. But again, we've talked about, massive communities that don't have that payment instrument, right, to connect. So we have seen, different applications of that. So I think that like, it's happening today, albeit at a smaller scale, in different communities. So how do we get that to scale? I do think that like, we're still in the early days, right, of kind of just the crypto economy in general. And once all these pieces start to coalesce around each other, the wallet will basically be a very a very important part of that ecosystem, because essentially it's everything from where a user can like store their identity. I've always seen a wallet as kind of like a single sign-on, right, to be able to access like different dApps or applications kind of in the ecosystem. It's something that, obviously you're storing your own value. And for many of these communities that deal with, high inflation, et cetera, it's a way for them to kind of preserve value where, maybe it's being lost in other systems or areas. And then kind of the third, it's like, it's a tool that helps them access opportunity, right? And whether that's through kind of, DeFi, earning, et cetera. I do see wallets as a tool for that, to help them kind of be an access point to this. And again, this is the reason why I'm so bullish on the mobile phone approach, is because like again, it just gives access to the broadest population of people, since most of us have a mobile phone in our pockets.
Yeah, I mean, in Guatemala, 90% of internet usage comes from mobile phones. And it's not surprising because everywhere you go in the streets, you see people watching YouTube videos, TikTok, Instagram Reels. Um, and it is very evident that we are just going to leapfrog the personal computer, basically. And I think optimizing for a mobile first approach, I think, is hugely powerful. And as far as mass adoption, I think is 100% the approach to go. And there are
Yeah.
wallets that do a fascinating job at, offering a decent like mobile experience. Or let me repeat that. There are wallets that do a really great job at offering a desktop experience, but the mobile application is horrible and takes like 2 minutes to load, for example. I won't name any names. But, I do think that being able to optimize for these developments that allow folks to access a wallet with a download from an app store, I think is really crucial. And focusing on the on and off ramp question as well. I know you guys are exploring a lot of work with Fiat Connect as well, and so I'm wondering if you could perhaps just speak to Fiat Connect briefly, because I do think that that is oftentimes a huge barrier to adoption with folks, is having to on and off ramp. So whether it's Fiat Connect, or where have you seen people really be able to overcome the on and off ramp challenge, and how do we do this at scale? Because we have on and off ramps that require banks with local vendors, so on and so forth. I love the idea of being able to integrate UBI, and that facilitates the on and off ramp question. But curious to get your thoughts on that piece.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. Yeah, I mean, just a quick primer on what Fiat Connect is. You can think of Fiat Connect as kind of like a wallet connect, but for on and off ramps. And so, any provider or any wallet can kind of take advantage of it. And essentially, it's like an open source kind of connection point, that will enable kind of interoperability between all these different things. And it's really the goal of like lighting up an on and off ramp in every market in the world. And so the best way to do that is to make it open. So it's not just a Valora thing, not just a Cello thing, but something that we hope will be something that will be more widely adopted. And I think that there has been a lot of traction just from more markets being available to these types of crypto to fiat on and off ramps through these bigger providers that we've been working that Valora's been working with, like Ramp and MoonPay, et cetera. So it's been promising to see that level of traction. I think where something like where Fiat Connect comes in is kind of to this topic of last mile, right? Where it's like smaller providers in emerging markets, right, that may not be serviced or covered by some of the bigger players, can actually serve their communities, through on and off ramps that are relevant to them, that are in their local currencies, et cetera. And so this actually enables just better localized solutions to be built by local players in those ecosystems. And so I think that's also a key, right? Again, we've been seeing some great traction from some of the bigger global players, which helps us as a wallet a lot. But at the same time, if we're really talking about how do we make sure that we're empowering folks in Guatemala, or some of these other markets and communities, they may not be one of the focus markets essentially. This is a great avenue and tool for them, and hopefully it can kind of be something that will have the option for all these different on ramps and off ramps, that will eventually translate in a more competitive price, right, for the end user. Which I think would be a great outcome, because then it kind of lowers at least the cost barrier to adoption for many of these communities, that just makes it more affordable, and helps them retain more of their money.
Absolutely. I'm
Mhm.
really excited to see Fiat Connect continue to sort of grow and create a big movement as far as being able to democratize access to on and off ramps globally as well. So tying into that question, or let me rephrase that. So stepping out, even further, let's discuss a little bit of, the current state of wallets outside of the Valora kind of ecosystem, right? And, what have you observed across all the different wallets that are offered today? What are the challenges that you have seen in aggregate across these different wallets? And what do we need in order to overcome those challenges, whether that's UI, private keys as well, and how does Valora think about each of these different questions as you go about thinking about creating the most seamless, beautiful, easy to use experience for wallets?
Yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of wallets coming out, and I think that, some of the um, different wallets, right? Sometimes we'll have different use cases. Sometimes they'll be focused on different chains, et cetera. In the future, I think that really what users will care about is kind of relevancy to them, right? Is it relevant to them, meaning like, is it localized to them? Does it serve their use case? And does it do it better than anything else, that they may or may not have access to? And so these are the questions that we ask ourselves at Valora. And so I think that's one part of it, right? Is like we try to make it as relevant to them for their use case, for their market, which is why we invest so much in localization, kind of clean UI, trying to make it as easy as possible, and also one where we're working with kind of these local communities and markets to make the solution as relevant as possible to them. I would say it's still early though, because what I've learned just kind of in my career of working with new technology is like sometimes people don't necessarily know what they need or want, right? And so I think that it's our responsibility, just kind of like as a broader kind of crypto ecosystem, and a responsibility that we take very seriously at Valora is to iterate, refine, and kind of design these systems to be as easy to use, but then also listen to our users, right? As we kind of build things for access, ease of use, etc. And I do think that like taking a look at how do we build for as much access as possible. You kind of referenced earlier that like many of these wallets have kind of started in the desktop version and have created a mobile version to it. There's still some work to do, right? Obviously, for especially for some of these more broadly adopted wallets. I would say when I take a look at the wallet landscape, like you know, um, going back to different wallets for different use cases and maybe even for different audiences. A lot of what exists today, at least in my opinion, is for the power user, for the crypto power user, which is fine. And I think like, obviously there's a lot of great solutions out there and there's been a lot of work done. But in terms of, actually designing for someone that may not be familiar with crypto, how do you make it relevant for them? How do you make it approachable for them? I think that's something that, we really strive for at Valora. Um, going back to kind of building for access, like our thesis is really like you should be able to do everything on your mobile phone, sign up, add funds, transact, access dApps, or whatever use case that you want to do. So I think like, that's the thing that we've always seen as kind of our key differentiator is like, how do you have that seamless experience on mobile end to end?
Definitely. We are very far from that, although I know Valor's, taking us a step closer. So as far as the scalability of Valora and how you plan on taking this app to hundreds of millions, billions of people around the world, being really ambitious here. What needs to happen? What needs to be in order, technologically speaking? I'd be really curious to
Mm-hmm.
hear more about that. You mentioned that you can send funds with a single token rather than requiring Zello in your
Mm-hmm.
wallet, right? So I'm curious, like, dive into both the sort of technical requirements and things you're really excited about, and then
Mm-hmm.
also more from like a social landscape how do we scale more wallets? We've mentioned
Mhm.
already, like providing people with very clear use cases, and I think that's super important as well, because I think
Mhm.
oftentimes it's the old Henry Ford adage of, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for a faster horse,
Yeah,
right? And so
exactly.
let's explore like the technology, that like the car
Mhm.
functionally, what do we
Mhm.
need from a technological standpoint, and then what is
Mhm.
that new frontier that we can deliver to folks through better wallet.
Sure. Yeah. Uh, yeah, it's interesting because like what is possible today with Valora already has like massive potential. The ability to kind of text money to any phone number in the world. There's 6 billion smartphones out there. And so like this kind of unlocking of a global Venmo, it's like you can send those funds, great. But I think the challenge that we've learned is, well, what happens when it gets to the other side? Can use this digital currency kind of in local currency? And the answer is always like, it depends. It depends where you send it. And that's kind of where this on and off ramp um, conundrum comes in. And so I think that like, the Cello team and Valora, like over the past several years, they've done a lot actually from a technological standpoint to like have this global Venmo use case come to life and to be true. And so, like I said, it's like you can send those funds today, but where it lands, like this is kind of the work that not only we have to do, but I think the broader ecosystem, right? Like I think we're still early in terms of just like overall infrastructure and also just how useful is this digital currency in the real world. And that's the part where again it's not just us obviously having like not only having this challenge but also working on this problem, but is something where like the entire ecosystem needs to coalesce around like, okay, well, how do you kind of make these currencies more useful to people all around the world? And so again, this is kind of the reason why like Fiat Connect kind of has this open mission and one that is really focused on, yeah, anyone participating in that. Yeah, but I think like really thinking big, right? The potential to serve anyone with a mobile phone with the ability to access, yeah, financial services basically through their phone is there. But in terms of like I said, it's like, is it useful? Is it relevant? I think like that's the work that needs to be done. And obviously that's a very hard problem to solve. And if it was solved already, I don't know, a company like PayPal or even Facebook tried to do this. It is a hard one because there's many, it's not only a global problem, but it's also a local one, right? Like how do you make those solutions localized to those specific markets? And so that's kind of the, or at least where we're starting, right? Is like, how do you make those solutions relevant to people in those markets, kind of learn and iterate from that and then scale and then move forward from there. But I do think it's something like the whole community has to rally around, which is why I've always loved your work, Marcus, in terms of just like really looking at like what is, the entire ecosystem, like what does it actually take for all of us to get there? Because I don't think it's well, any one company's challenge or project's challenge, but it's one where, you know, the whole ecosystem, I hope will trend in that direction.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's really the intention here, right? Is we're not developing in silos. In fact, we're
Mm-hmm.
intentionally building composable infrastructure, right? And the only way that we will be able to reach this mass adoption is by, hey, I've got a really great app. All right, well, how can users access this app? Okay, it has to be on a mobile first application whereby the onboarding process is super easy. People can immediately on and off ramp, right? Because without that, is like this app will be completely useless.
Mm-hmm.
And Stunny recently tweeted something along the lines of, we don't need more layer twos if we don't have adoption, right? It's like we
Mm,
focus so much on
yeah.
this supply side of crypto without, oftentimes it feels bothering to take a look at the demand side. And
Yeah.
we've seen a fair amount of demand. And, I think the one thing that no one expected to bring in millions of people into the space were NFTs. And all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden that was like the biggest sort of entry point into the space, right? And so I'm really excited to see that whatever that next iteration is, and maybe it will continue to be NFTs, for example, and empowering artists around the world, and maybe being able to access a marketplace through Valora, for example, right? Or whatever that is. I'm just super bullish on being able to localize this. But the problem is it feels that we've sort of reached the max capacity of the hyper, like, technically savvy folks who are willing to go through the hassle, right? And the next folks that will be able to access crypto, actually the solution does have to be super localized, just starting with a language, right? I remember there was a project that tried to launch a somewhat similar to UBI, and the whole thing was in English and there was no translation in Spanish, and they were trying to launch in Latin America. And I just, that's a non-starter for people here, And so I love that you guys are taking a very inverse approach, and that the history of Valora, in fact, to some extent started there as well. Like, hey, how can we empower, this ties back to questions around, like, what's the role of crypto in refugee camps and in Latin America and sort of disenfranchised communities, etc. So just really excited by the work you're doing, and really looking forward to seeing where the Valora ecosystem continues to grow and flourish. Before wrapping up, I'm wondering, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners? Anything we haven't touched on so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, if you haven't checked out Valora already, you can find us on the App Store. So just search for Valora and you'll see a little tile gradient of yellow and green. Visit our website at valoraapp.com, follow us on social at ValoraApp, and or find me on Twitter at Jackie Bona. And so, yeah, always happy to, talk to anyone about the future of wallets, kind of things that we could be thinking about, Latin America. So all these different things that we've touched upon today. Would love to, continue the conversation. So thanks so much, Marcus, for letting me on the podcast.
Absolutely, Jackie. Really, really enjoyed chatting with you. I'm sure the listeners will get a wealth of knowledge from this conversation. So I'll see you around. Take care.
Cool. Thank you.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in and joining us along this journey of discovery and exploration as we look towards the frontier of decentralized finance in Latin America. This episode was made possible thanks to the support of the Ethereum Foundation's Fellowship Program, Lens Protocol, and the Celo Foundation. The EF Fellowship Program is a forum for leaders who are driven by leveraging Ethereum as a public good to help billions of people coordinate and thrive. The Fellowship Program aims to support individuals who are passionate about identifying barriers to mass adoption and breaking down the barriers for underrepresented communities to access crypto. Lens Protocol is an open source tech stack for building decentralized social networking services. The protocol was developed by the Aave companies and launched on Polygon in May of 2022. Through Lens, Web3 developers can build decentralized social media applications and marketplaces that leverage NFT technology to form a fully composable, user-owned social graph, where the connections and interactions between people are owned by individuals, users, and creators, rather than established networks. And if you're looking for a blockchain platform that's designed to work in the real world, Celo might be the solution for you. With its focus on being carbon negative, mobile first, and EVM compatible, Celo is leading the way towards a new digital economy that's accessible to everyone, particularly those in the global south. Don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and family. Let's connect on Twitter at MarcusDotam, as well as on Lens, Marcus.lens. Until next time, keep learning, exploring, growing, and I'll see you on the next episode. Ciao.